Elena had always believed her life was picture perfect. She and her husband, Mark, had been married for 10 years, living in a cozy suburban home with their two beautiful children. On the surface, everything seemed ideal, their bond one that many envied. Yet beneath that polished exterior, Elena felt an ache, a void she couldn't quite understand or fill. Mark was a good man, but over time, his attention had shifted away from her. His focus on work and family responsibilities left little room for intimacy or romance. Elena missed the spark they once shared. She longed for excitement, for deep connection, something more than the routine exchanges of daily life. During this period of quiet dissatisfaction, Elena met Desmond. Desmond was a charismatic, tall, and confident Black American musician who had recently moved into the neighborhood. He had a presence that commanded attention, a smile that lit up any room. Elena first noticed him at a community event where he performed, his deep, soulful voice stirring something deep inside her. A chance encounter at the grocery store soon led to their first conversation. Desmond was warm, engaged, and genuinely interested in her life. They laughed over casual small talk, and before long, their paths seemed to cross at the park, the local cafe, or other community gatherings. Elena and Desmond started to share more than just pleasantries, something deeper, something more real. Desmond listened to Elena in a way Mark hadn't in years. He noticed the little things, her new haircut, her favorite coffee, the way her laughter filled the room. What began as innocent conversations gradually deepened. They exchanged lingering glances, and the undeniable chemistry between them grew too strong to ignore. Elena found herself texting Desmond late into the night. Their messages became more personal, vulnerable, and raw. One day, Desmond confessed he couldn't stop thinking about her. Elena, torn between guilt and exhilaration, felt the gravity of her actions, but the pull she felt toward him was impossible to resist. They met in secret at Desmond's apartment, where their connection reached its peak. Desmond treated her with a passion and intensity she hadn't felt in years, making her feel seen, cherished, and alive in a way she hadn't in a long time. For a while, Elena lived a double life, torn between the man she had promised to love forever and the one who made her feel whole again. But secrets always find a way to unravel. Mark began to notice the changes in Elena. She was distracted, her mood lifted yet distant. One evening, unable to ignore the shift any longer, he confronted her. "Is there someone else?" he asked. Caught off guard, Elena collapsed under the weight of the question and confessed everything. The revelation shattered their marriage. Mark was devastated, struggling to understand how the woman he loved could betray him. Elena, too, was torn between guilt and the painful realization that she had been searching for something her marriage no longer provided. In the aftermath, Elena and Mark attended counseling, trying to rebuild the trust that had been broken. Desmond, understanding the weight of Elena's decision, stepped back, leaving her to sort through the wreckage of her choices. The road to healing was long and painful, but the affair forced both Elena and Mark to confront the cracks in their relationship. Whether they could fully recover remained uncertain, but they each emerged with a deeper understanding of what they truly wanted and needed. Elena's affair with Desmond became not just a story of infidelity, but one of self-discovery. It forced her to face uncomfortable truths about love, desire, and the complexities of human relationships. As the weeks turned into months, Elena and Mark found themselves navigating unfamiliar territory. Their once predictable routines now consisted of awkward silences, emotional outbursts, and moments of vulnerability neither had anticipated. Counseling sessions became the cornerstone of their efforts to rebuild. Elena faced her guilt head-on, acknowledging the pain she had caused Mark and their children. In therapy, she explored why she had sought out Desmond in the first place. Through this process, Elena realized that her affair wasn't just about dissatisfaction with Mark, but about her own struggles with identity and self-worth. Mark, meanwhile, wrestled with his anger and sense of betrayal. For a long time, he couldn't look at Elena without seeing her with another man. Yet, as the counseling sessions progressed, he began to understand how his emotional distance had contributed to the rift in their marriage. This realization didn't absolve Elena, but it opened the door to compassion. Desmond's presence continued to linger in Elena's mind. Though she had ended their affair, she couldn't deny the profound impact he had on her life. He had awakened a part of her she thought was long dormant, an inner woman who yearned to be seen, heard, and loved without conditions. One day, Elena decided to write Desmond a letter, not to rekindle their relationship, but to express her gratitude and say goodbye. In it, she thanked him for showing her what she had been missing and apologized for dragging him into her unresolved marital issues. Desmond never replied, but Elena felt a sense of closure. After sending the letter, she realized that her journey wasn't about choosing between two men, but about rediscovering herself and taking responsibility for her actions. At home, Mark and Elena slowly began to rebuild their connection. They started going on dates again, rediscovering the small joys they once shared. They laughed more, argued less, and made a conscious effort to be present for each other. It wasn't perfect. Trust takes time to rebuild, but they were both committed to the process. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Mark reached for Elena's hand. "I don't know if we'll ever be the same," he said softly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "But I want to try. For us. For our family." Elena squeezed his hand, her eyes welling with tears. "Me too," she whispered. Their story wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, Elena felt a glimmer of hope. The affair had left scars, but it had also sparked a transformation, one that reminded them both of the importance of love, honesty, and the constant effort it takes to keep a marriage alive. Through the pain and heartbreak, Elena and Mark emerged with a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for them that was enough. As the months passed, Elena and Mark continued their journey toward healing. They made a pact to move forward with transparency, addressing uncomfortable truths instead of sweeping them under the rug. Mark began to open up about his struggles, the emotional distance he had allowed to grow between them, the drive to provide for their family that had left him unavailable. Elena, for her part, became more attuned to her own needs and desires, no longer taking them for granted. They both understood that rebuilding their relationship would require constant effort, but they were willing to face the work ahead together. For years, Mark had taken Elena's presence for granted. He had assumed that their love, the foundation of their life together, could withstand anything without much effort. But the affair shattered that illusion, forcing him to face his own shortcomings and the emotional distance he had allowed to grow between them. Elena, on the other hand, was unwavering in her honesty. She opened up about the loneliness she had felt for years, the quiet ache of being invisible in a marriage that had once been vibrant, and how Desmond's attention had made her feel truly alive again. These conversations were painful, raw, and often uncomfortable, but they were also a turning point. For the first time in years, Mark and Elena were really listening to each other. Determined to rebuild their bond, they decided to create new memories. They began traveling together, exploring destinations they had once dreamed of, but never had the chance to visit. On a trip to the mountains, they rediscovered the joy of simply being in each other's company. Hiking through the trails, sharing quiet moments by the fire, they found a closeness they had longed for, but had been missing for so long. Their children, who had sensed the tension in the house, noticed the change too. Family game nights and weekend outings became regular occurrences. Mark and Elena were resolved to show their children that love could endure even the darkest times. However, the road to healing was far from smooth. There were still moments of doubt and pain. Mark occasionally struggled with vivid images of Elena and Desmond, while Elena wrestled with deep guilt and the fear that Mark might never fully forgive her. These moments often led to arguments, but the nature of their arguments had changed. They were no longer about sweeping things under the rug, but about confronting uncomfortable truths. They didn't avoid the hard conversations anymore, because they both understood that facing them was the only way to move forward. One day, while unpacking boxes in the attic, they stumbled upon a photo album from their early years of marriage. As they flipped through the pages, they laughed at the awkward hairstyles, the silly poses, and the youthful dreams they had once shared. "Do you remember this?" Mark asked, holding up a photo of their first vacation together. A beach trip where everything that could go wrong did. From a flat tire to a sunburn, it was a trip full of chaos. Elena chuckled. How could I forget? You spent half the trip trying to fix that tire in the pouring rain. And you sat there with that ridiculous umbrella, trying to keep me dry. Mark smiled at the memory, his eyes softening. In that moment, they both realized something profound. Their love had never been about perfection. It had always been about resilience, about choosing each other even when things were messy, when life wasn't ideal. The trip had been far from perfect, but it had become part of their shared history, a reminder of how they had made it through together. As time went on, the wounds from the affair began to heal, though they would never completely fade. They became part of their shared story, a reminder of how far they had come. Elena and Mark were not the same couple they had been before the affair. And that was okay. They had grown, both as individuals and as partners. Their marriage was stronger now, not because it was flawless, but because it was built on a deeper understanding of each other and an unwavering commitment to move forward together. In the end, their story wasn't defined by infidelity, but by redemption, a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the courage to rebuild after the storm. As the years unfolded, Elena and Mark's relationship evolved into something deeper, more honest, and unexpectedly beautiful. They became partners in a way they hadn't been before the affair, fully aware of each other's flaws, yet choosing to stay and grow together. Mark, realizing the importance of presence in their lives, began taking up hobbies that allowed him to spend more time at home, something that once seemed impossible with his demanding career. He now prioritized not only providing for his family, but also being present for them. This shift felt like a gift to Elena, a gift she never thought she would receive. Meanwhile, Elena began rediscovering herself outside the roles of wife and mother. She started painting again, something she had given up after their children were born. Mark often joined her in the studio, sipping coffee and admiring her work. One evening, after they tucked the kids into bed, Mark surprised Elena with a small canvas. The painting was simple, a sunset over a lake, with two figures sitting side by side. It's not much, he said, handing it to her, but it's how I see us now, imperfect but together, finding beauty in what we've been through. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She hugged him tightly, whispering, "Thank you for staying, for fighting for us." The memory of Desmond still surfaced from time to time, though not with the same intensity. Elena often reflected on how he had been a catalyst for change, not just in her marriage, but in her understanding of herself. She hoped, as she was beginning to find peace, that he too had found happiness. The true turning point came one summer evening, during a neighborhood block party. Elena and Mark were mingling with neighbors when Desmond appeared, a guitar slung over his shoulder. He had been invited to perform by one of the organizers. Elena's heart skipped a beat at the sight of him. It had been months since she'd last seen him, and she wasn't sure how Mark would react. But to her surprise, Mark simply nodded politely as Desmond approached them. "Hey Elena, Mark," Desmond said, his tone calm and respectful. "It's good to see you both." "You too," Mark replied, his voice steady but guarded. Desmond performed a soulful set that evening, his music weaving through the air, connecting the past to the present. As he played, Elena felt a sense of closure that she hadn't even realized she needed. Desmond was a part of her story, but he no longer held power over her heart. When the performance ended, Desmond gave them a small wave before leaving quietly. There were no dramatic exchanges, no lingering tension, just a mutual understanding that their paths had diverged, and that was okay. As the night wore on, Elena and Mark danced under the stars, the soft glow of string lights casting a magical ambience. For the first time in years, Elena felt truly free, not from her marriage, but from the weight of her past mistakes. The years that followed were filled with new milestones, family vacations, celebrations, and quiet moments of joy. Mark and Elena continued to grow together, always mindful of the lessons they had learned. They knew their marriage would never be the fairy tale they once believed it to be, but it had become something far more real and meaningful. It was a story of endurance, of choosing each other despite the scars, and of finding strength in vulnerability. For Elena, that was enough. In fact, it was everything.